Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to Sci-Fi Chronicles. I'm pleased to have my friend with me today, Brendan from the Sense Sphere, as I'm sure you folks out there know of that channel. Good to see you, mate. How you doing?
Good. Making my debut on Sci-Fi Chronicles. This is good.
Yeah. You're locked in now. It's a 40-year contract.
Yes, I was in a different orbit. I've had to kind of just
Yeah,
you
yeah.
can see I'm in space. Yeah.
Basically, Brendan was in the garden and he was doing some lovely gardening, and I used the time scoop and just caught him and dragged him here.
Yeah. Which version of the time scoop? Triangular or that weird what? Yeah.
Yeah. Triangular, you're all hunched down, you know.
Yeah. What the hell's this? I'm one dimensional. Sorry.
Well, at least you get a seat in the triangular one, like Hartnell did. So that's at least you get comfy while you're
Yeah.
trapped for eternity.
And it doesn't matter if you grab me. I don't have any man bag or anything. Poor Sarah Jane Smith threw a handbag at will.
Yeah, exactly. Into the neighbour's hedge.
Yeah. Obviously, she was some drug mule.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's like the police raid any minute, just going into the house.
That's it. She knows what to do.
So today we're going to talk about Omega. And what we're going to do is we're going to go through it. Me and Brendan have talked about this. So we're going to talk about, first of all, Russell T Davies' comments in Doctor Who magazine about his view on why he's changed Omega. We're also going to talk about what he did to the character. But then what we thought we'd do is we'd go into talking about the proper Omega and talk about that iconic character from Doctor Who lore. So, I mean, to start it off, mate, I've got the Doctor Who magazine comments here, so I won't go through all of it, but it sort of says,
canon? Is this canon now?
yeah, I know. So, Doctor Who's mythology is always shifting, as are the characters within it. I sort of used the Time War to tweak the legend of Omega. A lot of things said about Omega were not said in the original series. You have to accept that 40 years have passed. The Time War came along and everyone's history got changed. So that's what Omega is now. You can reinvent it. It's not defying the law, it's just adding to it. Russell reflects that this is similar to how our own history is often revisited and recontextualized over time. There was plenty of fuss made about Winston Churchill being in Doctor Who when there's plenty of history to suggest he wasn't such a good guy. And that's always the way. Our history of slavery, our way of walking through the world, is constantly being reanalyzed. So I like to think it's the same on Gallifrey. That's happened over the eons. Omega has been recontextualized and the story gets bolder and changes over time. We don't want to repeat the past, we want to push it forward. And after the devastating events during the final 20 minutes of the reality war, there's plenty of scope to push Doctor Who forward into new mythology, new legends, and new stories. So, yeah. You know, I'm going to have to start putting a lot of money in the swear jar now, aren't I?
Well, that's what did the toy maker say? Well, that's all right then.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
I mean, again, this is classic Russell T Davies in a T, isn't it? You know, it's like, right, okay, I'm going to rebadge classic characters and I'm going to fit them into my new era of the show, and they are not recognizable at all from what made them so iconic. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm going back to 1984. I'm going back to authoritarian regimes who don't like awkward truths. They just rewrite and erase.
Yeah.
Because this, he's talking about Doctor Who, but then suddenly he's talking about slavery and he's talking about Winston Churchill. He's talking about icons. He's talking about real historical events, not just a sci-fi program. So suddenly you're going, all right, okay, here we go. Awkward inconveniences I can rewrite. To me, the first thing I want to say, John, is, and he did say this in the article, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Because he had the Rani coming back and they were jumping around the stage, so to speak. Why did he need to bring another Time Lord back? And he had to think it through and all of it. Omega was just a plot device, and he was an awkward plot device because of his mythology, his power and status in the
Yeah.
Doctor Who universe. So he had to be butchered. Oh, that's all right
Yes,
then.
exactly. I think I agree with you. You know, again, you know, when he's talking about evolving the mythology and characters, you know, so basically his way of evolving it is to make him be a giant skeleton with a fat ass that can't get through a door. You know, so
That cat flap.
so we've gone, mate. We've gone from this wonderful portrayal, you know, in the Three
He
Doctors.
had to take that helmet off to get through that sewer pipe. He had to take it off.
Yeah. If only he'd taken his trousers off, he might have got through that gate. Here, look.
If only he'd bi-generated into two skeletons. Or yeah, I don't know. It's just
I mean, again, you know, it's, and you wonder why, you know, and you wonder why the show is struggling. You know, it, you know, when you talk about the past, you know, there's people that weren't fans of John Nathan Turner, but at least he respected the history of the show. You know, we've now got a guy who calls himself a Doctor Who fan that doesn't respect the history of the show. So I think what I wanted to do, mate, is let's go in and let's you know, people might not have ever seen the Three Doctors or the Arc of Infinity, and that was kind of my thought process today of let's tell them about the Omega that we knew, you know, growing up watching what is called classic Doctor Who, or as I like to call it, proper Doctor Who.
yeah, the only Doctor. Yes, and look,
Yeah.
look at his glittery costume in the Three Doctors. He would have fitted the camp agenda of
Yeah.
New Who, wouldn't he? Perfectly. Just bring him back like that.
Absolutely, he would have been disco dancing all across that floor, wouldn't he? And dancing with the Rani, you know, if
Oh,
RTD had
God,
got his
yeah.
hands on that version.
Yes, the shooty doctor could have said, "Where did you get the material from?"
Yeah, exactly.
I can
Yeah.
think of some hot pants to wear at the next
Yeah.
nightclub.
Yeah. Do you want to swap outfits?
Honestly.
So this is Omega, introduced in the Three Doctors. Now, as we know, mate, you know, Omega is the Gallifreyan. I say that, the Gallifreyan who gave Time Lords time travel ability. So he was a solar engineer, and he harnessed the power of the black hole, which, you know, the Eye of Harmony, which gave the power of time travel to the Time Lords. But in the process, they thought he'd been lost during that experiment, during that mission. But in fact, he'd been sucked into an antimatter universe. And, you know, for eons, he existed in that antimatter universe until we get to the Three Doctors. So, you know, already there, you know, when you talk about world and universe building, where, I don't know about you, but when I first watched the Three Doctors, I didn't need magazines going back for weeks and months and years talking about the character of Omega, because they did a great writing job of just building that history of the character and the Time Lords and the lore building, and it was wonderful stuff to listen to and watch as I watched the Three Doctors for the first time. What about yourself?
Well, and I'll throw into this Terence Dicks with the Five Doctors, because what you get with good Doctor Who story writers is, yeah, you do get exposition, you do get a bit of explanation, but it just seems to be thrown into the script at suitable points. So I always see the second Doctor talking to the Brigadier about, you know, the Tower of Rassilon and all the rest of it as they're going along. Then, of course, in the Three Doctors, it's actually Bob Baker and Dave Martin do it really well, because basically you see the jeopardy and the problem on Gallifrey.
Yeah.
Oh, Gallifrey's got a problem. And we'd only seen them properly in the war games, and they looked all powerful then. So we thought, oh, X, something's really important here. Somebody really is challenging them. And then they just, it's great. All you need in sci-fi is somebody to console saying, the antimatter thing's doing this, and then they go, oh, thanks for that. And it's amazing, isn't it? The audience goes,
It
oh,
is.
the antimatter thing. Oh, and
Yep.
And then, of course, the best bit wasn't a load of exposition, John. It was the second and third Doctor looking at each other going, Omega. And you could see their respect.
Yeah. And also, in that story, you saw the respect, but you also saw the fear in their eyes at Omega, because, the Doctor Who had faced many monsters and villains since it started in An Unearthly Child. But this was literally a situation where I actually felt, when I watched it for the first time, the third Doctor in particular felt he was out of his depth there, and I always link, when you were saying about the Five Doctors, I always link to the Five Doctors where, that wonderful conversation that the third Doctor and Sarah are having in Bessie.
Yeah.
And he goes, well, that's the Tower of Rassilon. And he goes, oh, but whatever's in there has got enormous powers. What are we going to do about it? And the third Doctor says, what I always do, Sarah Jane, improvise. And that, to a T, is the essence of the Doctor. He's not ever going to have all the answers, but he's going to do what he can, and he's going to think on his feet to defeat them. And this is what we had with Omega.
And the other thing about this Omega, and a little bit with the Arc of Infinity one, is it's doing what Doctor Who does well again, which is he's a villain like in Phantom of the Opera or something like that, or Talons of Wen-Chian. He's in the basement.
There's a sympathetic element to him. Yeah.
This lone element skulking around, a powerful voice. You had the same with Shara's Jek in Caves of Androzani, skulking around, awaiting his moment for revenge. Doctor Who does those villains really well. So my final point on that is, so why the hell in Wishworld and Reality War did they have an Omega just kind of grafting up a drain pipe, looking like some dodgy cat burglar who forgot he'd been having too many burgers and his hips couldn't get out? I mean, what the hell was that? So basically, sorry, you said in the Doctor Who Monthly, Russell T Davies came up with his master plan of why he could get away with murder. Sorry, there is no way this is the same character in any shape or form.
And I completely mirror what you've said, mate. And I also think to myself, well, it doesn't make sense what he's saying about this, Underverse or whatever they're talking about, because he's talking about the Time War has changed everything. Well, Omega's in an antimatter universe. He's not in the same universe. He's got his own kingdom, essentially. Time will operate differently there. So the Time War wouldn't affect Omega's antimatter universe. So straight away, when I first read that, I thought it's a complete load of nonsense before you even get into talking about why you wanted to change it. There's
look, we all like that phrase to get us back in 2005, the Time War. It was a neat trick, but the golden rule is you don't ever show it. A bit like saying indoors in Minder, never show the person. You always have a character like that. In this case, it doesn't make any sense when you said about the antimatter. The whole point of Arc of Infinity was he needed to kind of find a hybrid to do the crossover. And of course, he picked the Doctor. Yeah. In this case, whether you blame the Time War and all that nonsense, why did he happen to be in the Underverse, which is a stupid idea, just underneath a kind of duvet cover of the Earth over London, and he just happened to be there? This sounded like the same old crap that Sutek just so happened out of the whole time vortex to be sat on the TARDIS.
Yes.
Stunning. And in this case, he was just sat there. And it makes no sense. You're going, are there lots of drain pipes all over? Because obviously this is a major irrigation.
It's like Super Mario.
Yeah. Why did they need to be over London? Because the Bone Palace was over London. I mean, we all know it was. So basically, because the story, John, would have been different if the Bone Palace was in Vietnam, because you wouldn't have been near the unit tower. So, they are questions, and RTD, as per usual, doesn't answer them. But because all he says is, I think we needed to refresh the law. You mean you found it suffocating and too hard?
100%.
You're a man in the hurry.
I think you're right, and I think you know, when we go back to, again, the Three Doctors, and you talk about, we talk about, it's a sympathetic character. The Doctors have to defeat him, but you have the Third Doctor right at the end of the story, and he's talking to Joe in the TARDIS, where he's been forgiven by the Time Lords, and he's down because he had to defeat this iconic, what he, and he even says was a hero of his, revered as the greatest hero. you know that shows you what people thought of Omega in Legend on Gallifrey. But you also, you flip that as well with, where the Doctor says, he goes, yeah, I've revered you as our greatest hero, and then you see the madness come out in seconds from Omega going, hero, I should have been a god. Yeah. And that is just such a wonderful bit of acting, bit of writing, and it's just wonderful stuff. It really is. And again, straight away you're looking at Omega and you're thinking that the Doctor's out of his league on this one. This guy is unhinged. He's got more power than the Doctor. He's defeating the Time Lords. He's 2 steps ahead of them at every beat. How are they going to get out of this one? It's a really good story. And if anyone's not seen it yet, if you've only just been watching New Who, I highly recommend you go and watch the Three Doctors, because that's how you create an iconic character and lore in Doctor Who.
And it's also because the Doctor has it a bit harder. He has to not use a gun. He uses a flute. Yes. I mean, basically, in this one, as you know, he's kind of, it's kind of some American movie where he's just gunning down Omega. But that's the other thing you said earlier, that in the Three Doctors, and actually the Fifth Doctor in Arc of Infinity at the end, he felt sad. He said that's the only kind of, I don't think he said happiness.
Any peace.
That's it, any peace.
Yeah.
And so the Third Doctor and the Fifth Doctor both lamented what they had to do to Omega.
Yeah.
And so you could see the respect. There's a lot of tragedy and there's a lot of pathos, and therefore it's a much more rounded character. Yes. Did you see the love and sympathy when Shooty was gunning him down?
Not at all. It was like you were just alluding to there. It was like a 1930s gangster flick, Yeah. It was, here we go. I've got my Tommy gun. I'm going to take you down now. It was, there's no investment in this recreated Omega as there is to the classic Omega. I mean, like you say, when you get to Arc of Infinity and the 2 Doctors have got sympathy for Omega, but it's very well played as well by the fact that what I like about Arc of Infinity as well, there's a couple of little bits. It's where he's finally got the Doctor's form, and you remember he goes to see the Dutch flute band playing on the bridge.
Yeah,
and you get the little boy that pushes in front of him, and he looks down at him with a sinister look, as almost like he's going to wipe him out or kill him at that moment. Yeah. And then the boy looks up and smiles, and he smiles back. So you've still got that. What I find about Arc of Infinity is the madness and the insanity in the Three Doctors is toned down a lot in the Arc of Infinity. He's more calculating in the Arc of Infinity, but you've still got those elements of insanity that can rear their head at any moment.
The bit you're talking about when he's in Amsterdam with the kid, there was an element where, I mean,
we haven't got to the Rice Krispies yet.
Oh yeah, it was. I thought that was very meta as well. I mean, yes, there's the version that you saw there. The other version is it was still Peter Davison acting in front of that kid with that horrible smile on his face of evil, saying, "I'm going to do the Button Moon theme tune in a minute, and I'm going to haunt you forever." There's that one. No, I just thought, I mean, there was an element of Frankenstein to it, the Arc of Infinity one, because that sequence you're talking about when Frankenstein's monster is talking to a little girl, I think she's Agnetha or something, she's blind.
Yeah.
And, you know, Mary Shelley's playing on that element of pathos. And so basically what we're saying is the people who invented Omega and then it was Johnny Byrne, wasn't it? Arc of Infinity.
Yeah.
Respected the classic version and went along with it,
Yes.
but had to develop it a little bit, as you do. But that's a big difference from a bit of development to what we got later on. But here lies the problem with New Who, John. And this is when I almost thought that lovely spanner called, do you just reboot? Because
Yes.
Doctor Who's mythology is 62 years long now. Omega's obviously substantial to it. And every writer now, if they do want to respect, you know, what's happened before, they have to almost kind of tidy it up. So, of course, you know, Arc of Infinity, he ended up somewhere. At the end of the Three Doctors, well, we didn't think he existed. And so there's an excuse in a way for the next writer to kind of tie us up in canon and lore, when actually, can we just write a damn good story like the Three Doctors was?
It is, yeah. You're right. I mean, it's going to take, well, it's going to take a writer and a producer with balls of steel to basically say, look, we need to fix this stuff. And I really hope we do get someone like that, you know, turns the ship around and tries to repair it. But like you say, it's creating an absolute headache for anyone that takes over in the future. I think, you know, when you look at that Omega character here, you know, we're saying loosely Omega because it's not Omega to a T. There's no, you know, from what I've seen of it, there's no Omega basically saying, you know, like where you had the sympathetic elements in the Three Doctors and the Arc of Infinity. At the end of Arc of Infinity, when he's in, you know, he's on, you know, he's lying down and the Doctor's giving him the choice. You know, Omega basically says, time to come home, Doctor. That's why he's doing it. He doesn't want to take over the universe. He just wants to go home to Gallifrey. And you feel that, you know, as you said a few minutes ago, the Doctor is in a terrible position here because he's got to banish or destroy, but he also wishes in a way that he could get Omega back home, but he can't. In this scene here, you don't have any of that talk of, I want to come home. You know, it's just a giant monster dog, isn't it, essentially?
Yeah. And I think this is one of the big criticisms, because obviously we can see the Omega and the Three Doctors, Arc of Infinity, and this one. And this is the only one, RTD, the only one where he has changed it so much that he's gone from the main villain in Three Doctors. Yeah. He was threatening the whole of reality there, wasn't he? With his antimatter. Then you've got Arc of Infinity, same again. The Time Lords were so scared. You know that some were allying with him, like Hedin, but even the president of Gallifrey was going to have to risk executing the Doctor to actually get rid of this kind of problem. They were so scared for their own existence. Then you get to this one, and he's a secondary minor baddie who appears for 3 minutes, doesn't really get any lines. I mean, he's been dehumanized. He's become basically like an animal almost. He's a CGI monster. Let's add another level, because in the Three Doctors, Omega's there in his glittery costume and very nice helmet, and it's very theatrical. Arc of Infinity, he went for a bit of, I don't know what it was, of strange leather garb, but he was in Amsterdam, so maybe he was just to help out there. And then and then this one is just a CGI extra from the Mummy movie.
Yeah, 100%. And I think this is also what you've just touched on there is one of my main criticisms with this new era of Russell T Davies. You know, everything looks like it's all done on a soundstage with the Disney, you know, what is it, the Zoom or the Vault, you know, that they've loaned them to do basically the backdrop like they use for Star Wars Mandalorian and stuff like that. You can tell now all they want to do is use that, you know, because it saves them time. You know, it casting wise, it would have been so much better. And this goes for Sutek as well, don't you think? That if you actually had a walking character, a top actor that had that voice like the original Omega, and was just walking around that room and basically saying, you know, I'm bigger than all of you, you know, you're beneath me kind of thing. You know, it would just give it so much more size. You don't need a giant CGI, you know, fat man in a skeleton suit to do that. You just need a top actor and a good script.
Yeah, either editorially he thought I've got a bit of CGI budget left and we need to go for it,
Yeah.
or he knew that he had a problem, RTD, which is he'd had such a gay sexualized doctor who obviously anything in leg, you know, any male in legs he's got an interest in. I mean, look how he talks to Colonel Ibrahim.
Yeah.
So if Omega appeared, as you say, in the good old classic Doctor and deep voice and everything, I think he'd melt. He'd go,
Oh,
I've
babe,
turned to
you're
the
my
dark
hero.
side. I think he'd go, you know, you get the two Ronnies joke. That's why you had the two
Yeah.
Ronnies, right? So I think in this, you'd get the Doctor, instead of saying honey or babes, he'd go, oh, mega. And you know, you go, oh, blooming. And I just think RTD sometimes is trapped by his own nonsense and camp humor and all that stuff, which he says he
Yeah.
wants to keep in Doctor Who. Because can you just imagine a very serious male villain who stands his
Oh.
ground like Shara's Jack? He'd be going, oh yeah. I mean, I don't know. I just don't think the dynamic works anymore because this Doctor just seems to stare at everybody as a sex object.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think also you also have the problem that if they did cast somebody that's a, you know, a high caliber actor, it's going to show shooty up, isn't it? That's probably part of the problem as well. I think, you know, I it's just this whole new era is, you know, spend crazy money on things like this, and we've talked about it before in private, but it's kind of like, oh, look at the big giant monster over here, but don't look at all the, you know, this will distract you from looking at all of the deficiencies in the story and the script, you know, and the
And
acting.
it's forgetting what Doctor Who is. Doctor Who actually doesn't need CGI, really. Yes, in our
No.
Blu-ray collections, it's nice just to kind of upgrade something. But actually, if you look at the Horror Fan Rock, when they upgraded the Rutan, it was based on the model. They
Yeah.
wanted a tangible model. So in the end, ultimately, you need something in the room. You need something visually that works. And I don't know what's so clever and super fan about RTD to think Omega. I mean, Razalon and Omega are the top in the Doctor Who universe.
Yes.
And I've now turned Omega into a 3-bit cameo role. He hasn't even got a personality. And honestly, what I struggled with is if he's so powerful as he was in the Three Doctors, as he was in Arc of Infinity,
Yeah.
how come he was that are basically really that you fire at him and then shut the door like he's like something in Larry Grayson's Generation game. It's like shut that door. That's it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It is nonsense. And again, it's like, well, you're talking about, you know, this story says, right, you need the Rani to get to the Underverse to basically bring Omega back. Well, we'd established in Classic Who, Omega could find a way back to this universe. He's able to do that. He knows how to do that. It's just how he goes about finding a body to sustain him in this universe. None of that is discussed or explored at all. In, I think you said to me, yeah, it's 3 minutes on screen for this version of Omega. I mean, you know, I would ask again, people go and watch the Three Doctors, because I'm going to say, mate, and you, I'm sure you'll agree with me on this. This scene here in the Three Doctors, where he's calmed down because the two doctors have said they are going to basically stay in his place so he can escape that universe. And he says, you know, he sets it up and he goes, and this is good writing again, he goes, you will need masks as well because, you know, it has a slow corrosive effect, but it takes time. And then when they lift up that helmet and then they shut it down and he's like, what are you doing? I'm in haste to be away. And they said, you know, we can't, you know, it's already done its work. You know, your body, your will is the only thing that's keeping you going. Your body is gone. And when you get to that point where he lifts it up, like we see in that image there, And the acting is incredible where he does that. It's almost like a child, you know, an insane person's cry for help wail that he does when he's
Oh, you
suddenly
mean
realized he's gone, you know.
yeah, it's a similar wail you hear in Ncuti Gatwa's 15th Doctor when he screams at the universe after he killed Sutekh. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I know. But
Oh, he breaks a nail.
yeah, exactly, and regenerates. I mean, if you look at that shot there, that's all you needed in Doctor Who. You've got a bit of
Yes.
CSO. We all knew, even as a kid, you probably kind of, but basically all you need in TV at any point or film is actually to just kind of help the imagination along. We
Yeah.
all, you know, we're not mad. We do know that this is acting. We do know that blah blah blah. So the point is, just help us with our imagination. Oh yeah, that works. And
Yeah.
you know, as a you know, the acting is still the star of the show. But also the other thing, John, that is the star of the show, and it reminds me of a few other good Doctor Who stories, is you got the element of in the dialogue. I'm thinking of one of your favorites, Pyramids of Mars,
Yeah.
when actually Sutekh, when he was more normal, was talking about what he could do to the Fourth Doctor. You know, I could play with you, and there's
Yeah.
some lovely lines, and that got that got you scared because you thought, oh my God, you
Yeah.
could do that to the Fourth Doctor. Now the same with Omega. You've just mentioned a bit of dialogue when, of course, you can hear in the dialogue that he must have been the solar engineer, and because the sun's there and it's been burning him away and everything, and then they take the helmet off and there's nothing left. The dialogue's done the work. The CSO just helps it.
Absolutely right. And you know, it just adds to that character, you know, and like you say, when you talk about it now, and we've talked about this many a time, you know, Doctor Who, you know, I've heard RTD say this before about, oh, you know, it's, you know, when he was coming back, he says, the Hooniverse, we're going to compete with Marvel, we're going to compete with Star Wars, you know, Star Trek. Doctor Who was never meant to be on that level of high budget sci-fi like that. You can do it, but all that people really, really want from Doctor Who is a sharp script and great actors. You know, that's it. And that's what these people did time and time again
And
in
the
the
other thing
classic
is,
era.
you get Americans on your show, I get Americans on my show, and they tend to be Doctor Who fans
Yeah.
because of the, I
The
mean,
Britishness, the unique
yeah.
Britishness of it.
Now, when they say the Britishness, there's a few different versions of that, which is maybe the imagination is a little bit out there, you know, like
Yeah.
even I suppose putting a barber shop on a spider, I think is very Doctor Who.
Yeah.
There's also the element that it's more limited and theatrical. So basically, the Doctor always has to use his brain, which is for free, and
Yeah.
a sonic screwdriver. That's basically it in essence. And yeah, you have a lot of corridors. So basically, the story has to carry you in other ways. And we've just mentioned the dialogue, which is for free.
Yeah.
Because your imagination's fired up about what Sutekh can do. If you really look at Sutekh's room, it's a bit like in Three Doctors. It's got the same paint effect. And you just
Yeah.
think, basically, it's a stage set with, you know, in some parts it looks like flats. It doesn't matter. The point
Yeah.
is, he was very theatrical. He was very overpowering. He was very melodramatic in parts, like the scream. But because it was set up so well, and I have to say, I don't know which one stands out most. Second Doctor's reactions. Whoa, you know, scared to death of them.
Oh, yeah. I mean, again, you know, that Three Doctors moment when which I love, you know, with the second Doctor, and you see the difference between the third and second Doctor there when they're face to face with Omega in his chamber, you know, because the second Doctor confirms to the third Doctor, he goes, you know, what are you trying to do? And he's trying to push his buttons to see how far he can take him, to see how far his self control can be maintained before it collapses. And the third Doctor's, yeah, that's a tricky idea because, you know, he's trying to get him to, you know, create a recorder for him, isn't he? You know, and he's trying to push his buttons. And even Omega says, are you sure you're of the same mind? you know, which is
Yeah.
lovely stuff.
Actually, you reminded me. We need to both edit this for our own shows, but there should be a
Yeah.
moment where we get Omega saying, "Are you both the same?" And you just basically have the shooty doctor next to William Hartnell or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah,
Are
exactly. Yeah.
you sure? I mean, it would have been more realistic if Omega came up that drain pipe and went, "You're the doctor. Oh, bye.
Yeah.
I'm off."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. Okay, I've lost you twice. I'll go. Cheers. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah,
See you
yeah.
next time. Come and
I
visit
mean,
me in the
honestly.
Underverse.
Yeah, yeah, I'm having more fun there. I mean, you saw Rogue down there; it looked like a happy party. But yeah, I mean, this version, what got me at the time, and look, we all liked the Three Doctors for lots of reasons. I mean, the gel guards. I mean, hello, do you need a
Yeah.
CGI budget? No, you don't.
No.
Um, and the gel guards was nice, neat trick that showed his power because he could will those to be in the
Those creatures
matter
to
universe
yeah.
to appear. And of course, you had that strange, lovely little effect that went down the drain. But funnily enough, went down the drain pipe
Yeah.
and would nick parts of the unit lab and stuff.
It's great.
I understood that as a kid, and I got it. Basically, he's all powerful and he can do almost magic tricks, although this is sci-fi.
Yeah.
And loved all that. And well done, Bob Baker, Dave Martin. Nice, neat trick. It made logical sense within our universe that it does look a bit Harry Potter, but it's because he's willing it to do that transportation. And you see,
Right.
there was so much humor in it, John, that one of my favorite bits in the Three
Chroma.
Doctors is when we got mistakes, like it was grabbing the wrong people in the lab,
Yeah.
it can't. I love this line. I think it was the Second Doctor's. It couldn't digest the unit headquarters, so it took it all. You know
Yeah.
that.
Swig of water.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
loved all that. You know, when you saw, was it the end of part 2 or something, or 3?
Yeah.
And you saw the whole of unit headquarters going there.
Oh, it's
That
brilliant.
wasn't CGI. That was a cardboard cutout. It was great.
Well, again, what you said a few minutes ago about the fact that, you know, they didn't have the budget to do all of these big effects. So what they did, you know, and Bob Baker and Dave Martin, fair play, because what they did is they wrote into it, they said, right, okay, right, this antimatter creature, it's taken Bessie. Right, why is it taken Bessie? Because we need Bessie to drive across the quarry when we get there, you know, in Omega's domain. Okay, great. So you've already written that into the script to basically that saves you a lot of money for doing, you know, for other reasons. Then, like you said, when Unit HQ is taken, and you've got okay, so we're now on in Omega's domain, but we're still in the lab, unit lab. And then another funny bit, which I love as well, that iconic moment where the brig goes, I'm pretty sure that's Chroma. Wonderful stuff. And the Second Doctor is, dear, oh dear, oh dear, you know.
Yeah. Well, oh, look, I mean, and it is all to do with Omega because the gel guards, for example, you know, it was the antimatter goo.
Yeah.
And the Second Doctor told Benton, you know, I think I've made this work and just give it a blast. And of course, you've got Geneva. He's got to go to a meeting, doesn't he? He's got a Zoom call. So I need you, Doctor, because this makes no sense. And, you know, he gives Benton the wrong information. And I just love all that because that's the essence of it. That, look, there's so many things. The Doctor didn't know everything.
No.
We weren't going large scale. I mean, did we need to see the whole of London was collapsing? No. We were in some sort of kind of wood. Unit headquarters was always secret. And it was nice and limited. I loved it. We got a quarry.
Fantastic.
That sort of stuff just works for me on so many different levels. And then
it does.
It did the classic sci-fi trick. You know, it was classic sci-fi because what it did was the solution was something so humble, like the recorder, but it worked because it was in the TARDIS magnetic field. Just like in War of the Worlds, it was a human cold. That sort of thing. So you can enjoy the adventure, enjoy the danger, and oh my God, how do you defeat Omega? Because let's face it, it doesn't make sense, John. He's like a god. So how can you defeat him? The recorder was stuck in the magnetic field. Now that makes sense.
Wonderful stuff. And, you know, again, with Omega, he says in it, and this is what I like, you know, as a kid, and I still love it every single time. He says about humans and other worlds in our universe. He says, they do not share in my, I do not, no, they're not part of my revenge. So he's effectively saying, I'm only going after the Time Lords. And the only reason that, you know, those jail guards turned up on Earth was because the antimatter creature found a Time Lord on Earth, discovered a Time Lord on Earth. That's why it's there. It's found the Doctor. So in my head, I always saw it that those jail guards were popping up everywhere on the Earth, you know, but they were only after the Doctor essentially. And I always thought wherever a Time Lord is in the universe, these jail guards are popping up. So again, it's really well done, and I like the this. You know, again, you don't know about what Omega was like when he did the initial experiment for time travel, you know, and converted the Eye of Harmony. Now, I think from things I've read before, I suspect he, you know, having that much intelligence and ability, there was an element of arrogance about him then. But when you go through eons of being alone and isolated, and your madness is developing over time, and you've got to that insanity level,
and you haven't got
you
YouTube.
are gonna, yeah, you haven't got YouTube, yeah, you haven't signed up to the Premier plan, you know, you for eternity you keep getting the adverts.
Yeah, there's no Netflix or anything.
or for a loop for eternity, you're seeing RTD 2 episodes. Yeah, so I mean, it's a wonderful creation of a character from writing, from acting. Everything about it is wonderful, and again, it's such a shame, you know, because as you know, I've said to you before, I checked out after season 1 when we did the reviews of, you know, season 1 of Shooty Who. You know, I couldn't carry on with it, as you know, and you kept me updated on what was going on in season 2. But as I went along and I was hearing rumors of Omega, I was praying that it wasn't Omega, because I thought to myself, at any other time I'd have been buzzing to get Omega back. You know, if this was 2008 Doctor Who, I'd be like, oh yeah, bring back Omega, because I think they'll at least respect it. But I was hesitant to see him because we weren't going to get him. And to be honest, it helps my mindset anyway, because we didn't get Omega in the end, did we? We just got a random CGI creature.
But his great finale was to bring back lots of people and villains and characters who nobody had been asking to come back in big numbers. Omega, I liked his story. I can see why you're saying with a good writer, you'd like to see him back. But in another way, John, I bet you would have thought Arc of Infinity was good enough. 3 Doctors was good enough. Mentioning him in Remembrance of the Daleks. Remember the Hand of Omega?
Yeah. 5 Doctors.
Yeah, you get hints of him. And I think that's enough. And actually, if you want to really do Doctor Who well, BBC, remember the trick. You don't show.
Yeah.
You just, you know, like it's the Erendor's Minder thing. You have this idea of Minder's, George Cole's wife, don't you? Going, oh God, Erendor's. And that's all you need. The imagination does the rest. So basically, I didn't feel a need to see Omega back. I didn't feel a need to see the Rani back. I didn't feel a need to see Susan back. All of them you tick saying, I'd like to see Susan back per se, but I've got no urgency, no need to have there's no story I can see at the moment. And there certainly wasn't going to be one. She was going to be Vlinx's Disco. That was hardly going to be a comeback for her, was it? Omega, honestly, how many times can you you've got to be careful of the law of diminishing returns. If you keep bringing back this arch villain, I mean, look at Razalon in The End of Time. I mean, what a waste.
It got Dalton, for goodness sake. It's like, you know, just got Dalton, you know.
I don't want the Master back. He's been overused. If he's now turned into a gold tooth, just, you know, what the next episode is the Doctor goes to the dentist, like in the Gunfighters. And, you know, can you put him in my mouth and then I've got him with me all the time? I mean, just it's over. It's over. So there was no need for this. And this is called Desperation by the real celestial toy maker RTD, who has no new ideas, so he has to go and plunder somebody else's.
Yes, exactly. And I think, you know, you're right. I mean, with Omega and classic villains, you know, they should be parked for a while. If it does come back and new villains, new monsters created, because that's the only way to really forge forward is creating new threats. And you know, as you said, you know, RTD is out of ideas. He's mining classic Who to fit into his ridiculous stories. And again, I would I would say, you know, if Bob Baker was around today, I think he would have not been happy at all with, you
Well,
know,
you've seen what his wife has tweeted, haven't you?
it. Well, exactly, you know,
I mean, but the other thing is, he look. I mean, if you remember how you started this with the all of his quotation,
mm,
his explanation, his immunity belt from Doctor Who Monthly. I'm sorry, but okay, I understand you can evolve a character. The Masters evolved, etc., etc. I buy that, but I don't buy into what you've done. I've got a quote here from the Three Doctors, and this shows the
yeah,
difference. So, as it was explained, Omega had survived, trapped in a universe of antimatter, a world that he alone could shape and control by the power of his will. But he was a prisoner, unable to leave without destroying his creation. Now, a kid of 4 could get that. His
yeah,
mind has made that whole, because remember, he could will a chair for them and everything. He could will a
yeah,
door.
yeah,
And so, you know, you as a kid, remember, it's accessible to every level. You're going, oh gosh, all powerful. Wow. But then equally, how sad it was to realize he's so powerful. It's all in his brain. The trouble is, how can he leave? And he needs a
and
split second.
keep the universe going. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. You know,
So basically, good writing. You've created a limit. You've created a restriction, and it works because you don't need 10 pages of explanation. You're going, oh yeah, oh
yeah,
no, you do that. And of course, in the reality war, you didn't get any of that.
no.
You know, that there was no kind of jeopardy in that way. He ate the Rani. I mean, honestly, what the hell's going on? He's been turned into Godzilla.
I know, it's like from the clip I saw of it, it's effectively, it's like feeding a mouse to a boa constrictor, you know, that kind of shot they went for, you know, and it's like,
It could, I
so
mean,
he's on a strict Time Lord diet now, is he?
yeah.
Literally.
Well, come on, we have allowed in robots to see a little action man, Sarah Jane Smith, shook around in the air. I mean, we could accept that. So, you know, you could have had a little Rani like Sarah Jane, ooh, and all the
Yeah.
rest of it, and just yeah.
If RTD had done robot now, a little doll Sarah Jane would have been eaten by the giant robot. You know that would have happened.
I mean, I'd have had a scrunched. Oops.
Yes, just
Oh
flat as
God,
a
I've forgotten.
pancake.
Yeah. Well, he did a pavement in Love and Monsters.
Yeah,
So I mean, you know,
he did.
Sarah Jane Smith is now a pavement. Literally, she's been squashed. Sorry.
I think you know, again with Omega, with him bringing Omega back. I mean, again, Omega as a character, an iconic villain that you don't share with another villain from the Doctor Who universe. You bring him back on his own. You know, the reason that things are happening is because he wants back in, and the antimatter is growing throughout the universe, and you know, it's going to doom the universe. That's where you create size with it. That's where you get an interest there. That's why Omega would be interesting. He's coming back. He wants to come back. Here, he's just like you said. He's 3 minutes in. He doesn't really want to come back because he's got his summer house in the under universe or whatever it's called. So he's quite content there, you know. And he's got Rogue that pops round for dinner every day of the week. So you know he's content. You know that's what you get from that character he created on the you know the reality war. You don't get any of this like Omega wants to come home, and the whole nonsense you had about, you know, the you know, the Time Lords are barren, and I'm paraphrasing, but Omega will help fix that problem. Why was he some sort of sperm donor for all of
Yeah,
Gallifreyans now?
he had a sperm bank. Yeah, it was one of the bits that wasn't shown in the Three Doctors. Bob Baker and Dave Martin talked about it often.
Yeah,
That while he was up, well, yeah, while
yeah,
he was on
yeah.
his own, in antimatter, he was getting up to mischief.
Yeah, yeah. The seal of Rassilon now, we haven't
Yeah,
been able to translate it, but what it really says is sperm donors welcome.
yeah. Honestly, he was prolific.
Yeah, exactly. I think just I think I've got to the point now in my life where and I'm the same with when the war between the land and the sea was announced. So many times in my life, I wanted a Sea Devil story, where sea devils are attacking the earth, humans, and you know, there's that battle going on, but there's an attempt to try and find a peace there. I always wanted that as a kid, but as soon as it was coming back in this era, they announced something. I thought, I'm never going to get what I had visualized in my head. And I'm at that point now with Doctor Who villains that I don't want them back if he's in, if it was to continue and he's anywhere connected to it, because you're never going to get anywhere near what you had in the classic era. He's just going to rebadge it every
No,
time, isn't he?
No, he's created his magic wand as a narrator, saying, "Do you know what? I can come up with any old excuse to completely change anything that happened before. But basically, I'm also going to be a grifter by using the name Omega, or
Yeah,
the name the Master, or the name the Rani to do what the hell I want." And you go, but that's absolute disrespect artistically, for what everybody else. Basically, it's a bit like a torch relay, a baton relay.
yeah,
Basically, each producer, each writer over the years has built the brand of Doctor Who, and where the love is because of them.
yeah,
RTD came through in 2005 and took the baton, and for a while seemed to respect, change a few
yeah,
things, but I'd argue that the word would be update. But then what you're finding now is he's basically just going, I will do what I want with what I want. And my big question as a media executive, and your dad was one of those, but I'm
yeah,
sure your dad must have had awkward meetings with people when you have to kind of get people to earn their money and say,
yeah.
hold up a minute. We seem to have had a whole series of old villains and old mentions. Is there anything new? Or could I get a different writer in on half the price?
Yeah, exactly right, mate. And I think that the trouble you have now, and we've talked about it at length, haven't we? About the fact that, and I've said it, I I don't. I blame RTD, but I actually blame the people above him more because they didn't hold him to account. They didn't hold his feet to the fire and basically say, "No, that is rubbish. You need to go away and you need to redevelop that script, and come back to us. We're not going to push forward with that." And they were the ones that were seeing the dailies come in and they didn't push back on it. They allowed this to happen. And they were the beggars to their own demise.
Well, there were loads of excuses for them to intervene, which is devil's card. You just say,
Yeah,
gosh, we've paid for an orchestra, we've paid for top dancers, loads of
yes,
them, to choreograph a whole routine. The question should be, is it relevant to the narrative? Oh, no, it's a clever joke at the end. Well,
yeah,
sorry, we'll save that money.
yeah. I mean, it's just it's gone into its own. I'd say its own camp law now, isn't it? That's
Yeah.
where it's got to, and again, sadly, as we've got on screen, we've got this iconic character that from Doctor Who's history that has been another one that's been sacrificed on the altar of it.
Well, Well, I feel as though we've eaten. I mean, never mind, he had nothing left of him apart from willpower. I feel as
Yeah,
though the only reason Doctor Who exists in 2025 is the fans' willpower, because what we're seeing on stage, on screen, is nothing. if you really think about it, it is metaphorical. What is going on at the moment is it's got the pretense and the helmet called Doctor Who, but when you take the helmet off, there's nothing left of Doctor Who.
100%.
It's just our willpower that is willing it to eventually turn back into it.
Yeah, great analysis. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a shame. I mean, we really do need a recorder and a force field now just to just to finish it off, don't we?
Where would you stick it? I mean, honestly,
if that was Shooty or RTD, I'd probably know what they'd say. But
it was just, if he's got willpower, he must have the same willpower as, I mean, we all, wane on diets and everything and stuff. But he had a great willpower in the Three Doctors. He had great willpower again in Arc of Infinity. Even when he comes up that drain pipe, if he was following some of the integrity of the main character, he'd have had the willpower to what? Have some gel guards, have the ergon, he'd have something else. Why was he on his own?
Exactly right. This is what I don't understand about it, because, if that seal's been opened, so it's just him waiting to come through, is it? There's no one else in the Underverse that would want to be scrambling up to come in, just Omega, which, again, he doesn't answer that question that people will have in their heads either, does he? It's the quick, have him on for 3 minutes, right, have the Rani eaten, and that's it, off to the next bit when Shooty's done his 1930s gangster Tommy gun moment. It's quite astonishing, the fall in the quality of writing as well, don't you think?
I mean, because he wasn't even joining the dots. It made no sense. I mean, basically, was Omega in the reality war, when he was climbing up the drain pipe, was he wearing Mavity shoes, Mavity underpants? Because how long is this drain pipe from hell? Yeah,
exactly.
I mean, who is he standing on, as you say? Who's below him? The crankies? Who is he standing on the shoulders of?
Rogue giving him a foot up,
Yeah, and it seems that there's all these stories. I mean, the Goblin King was the same. It was like Jack and the Beanstalk done again. And it's like, okay, he's climbed up this drain pipe. Now, I don't know. I haven't done that as a profession, but I think that's a bit hard to do from the inside. I think there's nothing to grip. But he gets so far and then he's just shoved back down again. It feels like, was it the Grand Old Duke of York? You get them up to the top of the hill and back down and you go, why did we do it? And I'm asking that question of Omega. And he's probably saying, God, I scrambled up that drain pipe.
Yeah, I know.
For 3 minutes. It's not even good appearance for money, that.
Yeah, but, you've got people who, who are viewers who have just by watching it have just asked that question. And it's amazing to think, why wasn't anybody else in the production asking that question? And it's like fear of being cancelled by the Great One himself. Is that what it comes down to? Nobody can criticize him or push back.
It's as if they're amazed by his knowledge of Doctor Who. Now, you find this sometimes. We're all geeks, if you get my gist. Some of your friends who aren't into this whole area, I mean, people say to me, when you're doing your stuff and they're going, oh, well, I understand. Oh, everybody will be amazed by you, Brendan, the amount and I'm thinking, I don't know as much as other people I've met. And you realize that RTD could maybe do that trick, which is maybe when he's in the room and there's Disney executives who, to be honest, they're looking at other stuff. He goes, Omega, Sutek, the Rani, and they're going, oh my God, this man knows his stuff. And I think that's been his job interview, just listing. And you saw in the Doctor Who magazine, what did it have at the top? He had 2 post-its.
Yes.
I know there was summaries of both season 1 and 2, but there was an element where he just goes this, and you can imagine the Disney executives going, "Oh, okay."
Yeah,
He sounds as though he knows what he's doing.
But don't you think also that also shows a big failing on these people, these producers and these execs, that, yes, you don't need to know every element of lore, but if he throws it at you, go, Omega, Sutek, blah, 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 you go, right, okay, I'll do a quick search, Omega, Sutek, right, which stories are Omega and Sutek in? Right, okay, so Sutek, Pyramids of Mars, right, Omega, Three Doctors and Arc of Infinity. I'll watch them and then we'll go back to RTD once we've discussed it. And you go, right, okay. So you're talking about Omega, you're talking about Sutek. Right, okay. So what's your story idea? What's the structure of it? What's the reason for Omega being here? Explain it to us, talk us through it. And again, you're right. I don't think even that happened. I think he just throws some names out from Doctor Who lore and history, and that's the end of it. Whereas they should have been pushing back and going, well, you're giving us kind of like bullet points, but you're not actually telling us about the structure of the story or the character. Why has he become a giant skeleton that's living in a drain pipe or is trying to climb up a drain pipe? What's the reasons for that? Explain it. It's got to make sense, because as fans and as new Who people, as you know, Brendan, I've had family members that started on New Who, but they went back and they watched classic Doctor Who because of watching New Who. So people are interested, and they were taken for a ride by the lazy writing, I think.
You see, I do respect other people who've done really well in industry. I really do, and it's my first default, which is I will respect you until you give me reason not to. So these media executives, I really did assume would say things like, right, you've said Davros is completely different now. You've said, there's been a quotation that I used on my channel about Cybermen, that when he was talking to disabled people, he said something about Cybermen can't come back the same way. And now Omega can't come back the same way. And the Rani can't come back. And you start to think, oh, now look, now I would expect...
Why are you doing a Doctor Who show then? Do another show.
I'd expect a media executive to say, obviously, Doctor Who and Star Trek and all these big franchises are driven by the fans. RTD, are we really changing Davros? We're changing the Cybermen. We're changing Omega. Why are we really changing everything? Will the fans be happy? Oh, yes, the fans will be happy. Well, if they're not happy, they can go and touch grass. I don't care. And that attitude on top will make me think he doesn't like to be questioned, but I've still got the question. That was a bluster answer. So I'll ask the question again, RTD. I'd have gone away thinking I don't like his attitude. It's a bit cavalier. I'd have had loads of questions.
Absolutely. And you also think, if you just wrote a Doctor Who show as it is, science fiction, and the only reason you're saying, oh, there's a problem with Davros, or there's a problem with the Cybermen, is because of the politics that you're putting into the show. If you just did those monsters, those villains in Doctor Who, without having to put in all of the nonsense that he's put in the last few years, they are in-universe creatures. You haven't got to explain. You haven't got to justify yourself. You haven't got to defend it. It's that old thing. If people are offended so much by it, turn it off. And if the viewing figures show that, fair enough. You live or die by that. But we've now got a situation where he's completely altered the show. He's made those comments about Davros. As you said, he's made comments about the Cybermen. He's done this to Omega. He's done that to Sutek. He has devalued what was a fantastic, and I hate using the word franchise, and as we were saying earlier in the show, someone is going to have to come in at some point, and they're going to have to fix the issues, because I'm actually at a point now, if they don't come in and say, right, okay, we're going to retcon from Jodie Whittaker onwards, I don't think they're going to get a lot of people back. because that's where all the trouble started. That it was eking in Capaldi's era, no doubt about it, but it was certainly the Jodie Whittaker era onwards that caused the problem. And of course, as we got in that finale, you know, and this isn't Omega, this is just talking about the episode. You've got the two most unpopular doctors in its history, and they double down on it to basically go stuff you to the fans and put them both in a scene together. But they clearly know that those two doctors are extremely unpopular, because if they were very popular, you wouldn't have to write, oh, you were the best, you know, you were the best male doctor, you know, those comments like that. You wouldn't have to put them in a script because people would already like those characters. The fact they've had to write that in, they know that they're very unpopular.
Well, is that he's been? I mean, it's where do you start? On top of that, he brings back now. Rose Tyler and Billy Piper were popular. That's definite. Yep. But by bringing an old face back, he's distorting. Now, remember, take RTD out the equation. He has absolutely bastardized the regeneration process.
Yeah,
Bi-generation, the Tinkerbell fairy dust. And now we've got that the Doctor can go back to an old face. Now, I know Moffat did it a bit with the Curator, but he's doing it so much that it's starting to turn it into a gimmick. Now, this is the most amazing thing that has made Doctor Who so successful. Regeneration, what a brilliant trick. And now RTD is turning it into a stunt, a gimmick. Right. He's only been back 2 years, John. We've had two bad generations. We've had a regeneration into underpants. We've had a regeneration and with a sledgehammer TARDIS. We've had a regeneration into a companion.
Yep.
This is and we've also had a regeneration into one of your old faces.
It's a death spiral.
Yes, he's breaking it too much. And I think it's too late. I think he's messed with it so much that people have lost their respect for the program. And I think my honest truth is it would have to be a harsh reboot now. And I think we've got to say, you know, a lot of people said 2017, that's my moment. And I never went with that because I thought, I don't like to block. I don't like to block an era. But I think now we've got to just park it. Just park it. It's a great concept, but park it and start again another day.
Well, again, you know, it's also, you know, I got fed up with the whole, you know, the New Who regeneration. I wanted to see, you know, the whole point of the regeneration is the Doctor is meant to be dying. He's meant to be his whole, you know, as has happened before, cells in his body are dying. He's knackered. He's in a critical condition. For crying out loud, at least lie down for once, you know. All this standing up nonsense. I got so fed up with it. But I mean, I'm in the mindset that I want them to effectively retcon Jodie onwards, because that's really where the critical rot set in for the show and the stuff they did. And the reason I think that is because, like you said, with 60 plus years of history and continuity, I don't want that guy to have destroyed, and Chibnall to have destroyed, what was a wonderful show. I want that to still be intact, all the wonderful stuff we've had, and for that to continue. But I will agree with what you've said before. You've got to get rid of this flipping Doctor 500 or whatever nonsense. You know, it's the Doctor. That's it. You don't need to number them, you know, unless there's a multi-Doctor story, you know. But even then, you haven't got to do it. You just go, oh, hello, Doctor. Hi, Doctor. You know, everyone knows.
I think honestly, and I know what I'm saying betrays something that I as a fan like, but you can't give fans everything. I think to move forward, we need to not show a linear link. So basically, we need a gap, and we don't show the next Doctor regenerating from this one. I actually don't know why they needed to do that Billy Piper thing, apart from the obvious stunt. I just think you leave it a bit like Ace and the Seventh Doctor. Just leave it. They walk off. Of course, you assume if you see a different Doctor in the TARDIS, oh, he's obviously regenerated, and you missed it. It's like missing a bus. Tough. There's no need for us fans really to go, oh yeah, really, if you look back, I didn't need to see a Harpo Marx blonde wig on Sylvester McCoy. Did that regeneration help? Not really. I'd have rather have just seen him half dead in the TARDIS and just had McCoy.
And then recovering. Yeah, that's it. I think, but again, New Who, they did it with the Ninth Doctor. They did it with Eccleston, didn't they? He just showed up. And again, there was that time, I was one of them. I was thinking, I really wish we'd seen the regeneration from the 8th into the 9th, but I could understand why they didn't do it, because like it was explained in the TV movie, they did the regeneration scene from the 7th into the 8th, but they said, if you're a new viewer, you're going in, seeing a Doctor machine gun down, and then you're doing a regeneration scene. Well, that's what is it? That's at least 20 minutes of the show before you've even got into the main plot elements of it. So it makes sense. And I agree with you, it should be you have a new story and suddenly the Doctor appears, whatever actor it is, hello, I'm the Doctor, and he's involved. That's it. We're off and running. Nobody would have a problem with that. I really don't think that would be a problem.
He doesn't. I think a version of he's lost his memory is the easiest trick, because then he doesn't know what number he is. Yeah. And that's it. That is honestly it. And it would stop all this nonsense that we're having now. I think that's why I think the brand's in danger, because for 62 years, the fan service is increasing again. And there's a level of it when it's like Japanese knotweed. It suffocates the actual show.
Yeah, I agree. I think you're right. And I think if it does come back, one final thing I'll say before we end it is that I think the Doctor, they need to be reduced. The Doctor needs to be reduced so he's not a god level status. I really don't like that now. It's and I've said to you before, my view is you have to bring the Time Lords back so there's someone above the Doctor, that holds them to account. You look at, like we've talked about the war games, you've got those big powerful Time Lords, and at the end the Doctor's running. You see the fear in the second Doctor's face because of how powerful they are. I want it to go back to that. So the Doctor is just a traveler again. He doesn't have all the answers. The Time Lords aren't perfect, but at least there's some beings higher above that are basically saying, right, he's out of order here. We're going to pull him in.
You also had, and since we've been talking about Omega, and it dovetails in nicely. In those 8 episodes of this last season, and you get the appearance of Omega at the end. Omega, you were talking about the hierarchy of the Time Lords being above the Doctor and limiting him. Well, Omega is way above the Doctor and way above the Rani. So, that's what you needed, is that respect for the hierarchy of what's in the Doctor Who universe. And I think a lot of reasons why we hated what we got there and we hate what's happening in a lot of Doctor Who is the hierarchy has been butchered. And actually, Omega, I mean, honestly, he is the main deal. You didn't need the Rani at all. The Rani, if she used her brain, would not want to bring him back. Would the Doctor bring Omega back? No. No. Too dangerous.
No, it's absolutely right. And again, it's where you said about, Japanese knotweeds. That's where you are of it, because you had the Jodie era where you've got, what are they? They're now Cybermen, the Time Lords, effectively. That wasn't really, that hasn't been retconned as such, it's still out there. So, these are the things that, again, a writer, if you're bringing them back now, you've got to explain all this away, before you can move on to the nitty gritty.
There's too much. It's like, if it's a Cybermen Gallifreyans, then that's why they're barren.
Exactly.
Metal parts.
Exactly. Yeah. You need a bit of WD-40.
I mean, honestly, build a new part. I think that's it.
But no, I mean that's it today, everyone. I really appreciate Brendan coming on today. Yeah, thanks, mate. It's good having you on the show. And again, you know, people know anyway, but you know, just let everyone know where they can find you.
Yeah, isn't it funny? About a year and a half ago, I was trying to invent what it would be called. It was going to be the Zero Room. I remember for a while
Yeah,
we were talking about
yeah,
that. Yeah,
that's right.
the Sense Sphere, all based on. He's already reviewed it. You know, when he did season one, the proper season one, the censor rights, and I thought, yeah, call it the Sense Sphere. We pretend we talk sense. We pretend we make sense. You can decide on that one.
Yeah, and again, you know, thanks for joining us, everybody. All I will say for the channel as well, have a look at the playlist, because we're doing classic Doctor Who reviews from, we've started at An Unearthly Child and we're working our way all the way along, which is great fun. And then non-Doctor Who stuff. So we do our Stargate SG1 watch-alongs on a Sunday night, and then we're doing movie and other sci-fi and TV show reviews, plus a Friday live show. So I might have to quit my job at this point.
It becomes addictive.
Yeah, it does. But no, thanks for joining us all. And until next time, take care of yourselves. See ya.
See you, everyone.